and welcome to another episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I'm with Grant Gurvis. Hopefully I said your name correctly. You didn't correct me before, so I guess this should be correct.
Yeah, that's good.
I believe he's an engineer over at Fig.
Yep.
So he's an engineer over at Fig, and he's here to talk about Fig and their recent rewrite to using Rust. So Grant, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Grant. I'm heading the Rust rewrite at Fig. Currently, I am rewriting the CLI, and we're working on getting to cross-platform with it. My background is I just graduated in December, and now my first full-time job, so yeah.
And Fig is what exactly? Because it's kind of a little bit up in the air. It seems like a way to, how do you say that? Give like autocomplete to your terminal, right? Is like, what is like the idea of Fig exactly?
Yeah, so Fig is really, we're trying to make sort of an ecosystem for the terminal. So like we want to help make terminal users, the terminal more easier for beginners as well as advanced users and more collaboratives for teams in general. So like we're creating this Fig.js API that will allow users to create visual apps that interact with the terminal. So our first app that we are really like getting onto people's computers with is autocomplete. So basically when you're typing in the terminal, it will give you a visual autocomplete like you would expect in Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ. And you're able to then get intelligent completions. For example, like when you type git checkout, you'll be able to see all the different branches that you could potentially check out. Or something more specific to Rust, if you are typing like cargo install, it will give you suggestions of potential crates you can install. And we're looking to then, we have other products that we're coming out with soon, such as dot files, which will allow you to sync your dot files across computers, as well as plugins, which will allow you to install shell plugins directly via Fig, which will make it easier for beginner users as well as advanced users to, like, for example, if you have used like ZSH Autosuggest or ZSH Autocomplete, these types of plugins, like sometimes it's a little pain, like you have to clone the repo and type source and everything like that. Or like you have to use some type of shell plugins manager, and we're making that really easy to sync across platforms.
Yeah, the ZSH is pretty awesome. I love using that one, but the thing I found that's quite a big difference is that I actually have to keep this Fig app running, right? Is that because there's like some kind of connection between the Mac Fig app and the terminal and what Fig's doing?
Yeah, so there's two main components to Fig. There's the actual Fig app that is running in your background. So basically that is what will pop up windows and like show like when you're actually typing. And then there's our integration in the terminal, which we call FigTerm. So basically it kind of works like if you've ever used tmux or some other type of like pane or like something else that sits on your terminal like that. Basically, we're able to then read and write via that integration. And so like we have these two different binaries running. And the main Mac app, we need to be able to like figure out, we need to be able to send a message and say like pop up the window. There's no other really easy way that we could like launch and then like shut down like every time you like type something. So it needs to be open. If you're bothered by the little icon at the top, you can also like hide the icon as well.
Yeah, connection is not the best, so I can only hear a little bit about what you're saying. So yeah, there is the icon up above that. I mean, it's okay for me to keep running because I have a lot of memory on my computer, but I just find it like a little bit, I mean, there's like, basically I have to run that one plus my terminal. But the other thing too is that you guys don't support all terminals out there, right? There's only a fine slice you guys support. But I mean, there's also not a lot of terminal apps too, right? So of course you're going to support the basic terminal.
First class support for the macOS terminal, iTerm, as well as VS Code and Hyper. And we're getting support for Alacrity, all the JetBrains terminals, and I think we have like Tabby integration coming soon. We have a lot of other terminals that we're getting support for. It just requires a little bit of work on our side to do it, but basically we should be able to support most macOS based terminals, and we're going to have full support for them very soon.
Now, for terminals, for you guys to support though, is it only macOS at the time? Because that's the only one I actually use, so I don't really know about any other support.
So currently we're only on macOS, but currently main reasons that we want to shift to using Rust is we're going to be going cross-platform to macOS and Linux. And we have like kind of like minimum MVP sort of like tests. We are able to like position the window and stuff like that, but we haven't gone the full integration, and we're expecting that to be in the next month or two. We should probably have some public beta of Windows as well as Linux.
Well, the Windows one is going to be really interesting because it's a totally different thing, right?
Yeah, so currently we own like our test, like our beta internally. Like the only thing we're able to really support currently is WSL because we're so hyper, like kind of specialized on like Unix based like terminals. So, but we definitely want to add support for things like Git Bash and like any other terminals that people might use on Windows. The issue is things like our completion specs that we currently have are designed for like a kind of like bash Unix type system. So like PowerShell is something that we currently like don't really have any support for. And that would definitely be a bigger challenge when we're going to Windows if we want to support PowerShell.
Okay, I caught pieces of that. I think I heard you say that you guys will mostly be supporting WSL. Is that right?
Yeah, so WSL will be probably our main, like that's currently what we have working, and we're going to be working on getting other integrations with like Visual Studio and other IDEs in Windows as well.
So even like CMD or PowerShell, you can actually end up supporting too?
We want to, it's just those are different, and those are kind of so much different from the Unix based like shells that we're used to. Like we currently have like completion specs, and there's so much of a difference between Unix and Windows that it's a little hard, but we definitely want to support it.
So we had another guest on here called from Warp, and you guys are in a similar, but maybe not exactly the same space, right? So how would you guys differentiate yourself between Warp and Fig?
So Fig really wants to bring to your existing terminal, like the ability to have these autocompletes and stuff. Like Warp is really trying to say like, hey, come use Warp, but we want to be able to like come to VS Code, for example, and like provide you these like completions and like any other future apps that we have. One other thing that Warp, they actually use our autocomplete specs. So like if you're using Warp and it gives you some completions, like those are using Fig's completion specs, and they don't package any sort of like runtime to actually like give you the full completions. Like with Fig, you're able to, like I was mentioning earlier, get like dynamic suggestions based on what you're typing, like for example, get checkout or whatever. And these are based on like JavaScript implementations. We're not bundling a JavaScript runtime, but we're using the native runtime built into macOS or other platform you're on. So we're able to like actually give you the completions because our specs are written for that. And Warp doesn't provide that for you.
Sadly, the connection's still really bad. I could catch bits and pieces of that. Maybe I have to listen to the episode after this. But I appreciate your asking. So just want to let people at home know that we have a little bit of a connection issue with two of us, but it should be fine in the recording. Okay, so yeah, because I remember we talked about before, and there's some crossover, but not too much. And I'm happy that you guys are looking at Kitty and Alacrity, because Alacrity has definitely been a terminal that I hear a lot about. I've never heard of Tabby before, but is there going to be a way that we can like have like, I haven't seen this yet, but what would be really nice if there's a way that we could have something like within that the app where you could say, okay, I want to download these kind of configurations or these support, because you guys only support a couple of apps out of the box. So if you go to fig.io, there's Git, npm, Kubernetes, Docker, and I know that you can write your own, but if there's a way that we can actually share those with the community, if we have
so we have a public GitHub repo that contains all of our autocomplete specs. So you can go to withfig/autocomplete on GitHub, and we have a massive community. We have a couple, like we have 150 maybe contributors, and you're able to go improve the specs. Like I've written a lot of the cargo spec, for example. We have completions for FFmpeg. We have completions for Git. We have any type of completion that you want. You're able to go to that repo, contribute, and then you'll be able to get those completions, and everyone will. And we also like have support coming for other platforms as well, like I was saying. So currently that's only on macOS.
Is there going to be some big changes that need to happen in order to support Linux and Windows?
Yeah, so that's a lot of where the Rust comes in. Currently, most of the app is written in Swift. We've been slowly moving over to Rust for most of our core internal parts. And we have a rewrite going on right now of the main kind of application logic that displays the window. But currently, for example, we have our two different components are written in Rust. So we have FigTerm, which, like I mentioned, is kind of like our way that we're able to read and write to the terminal. So like with FigTerm, we're able to see the current state of the terminal and then insert text. And our CLI is also now using Rust.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. Okay, I know that there's a Fig binary app. So that's the Fig CLI when I just type the word Fig, right? Yeah,
so we have our actual CLI application, and we have FigTerm, like I mentioned. And then we actually have the main Mac app, which shows like if that's the one up in your top of your taskbar, and that is we're currently converting to Rust as well. Yeah.
Is that one using Swift? Because that seems like a native app to me.
Yeah, that is a native app. It's currently using Swift, and we're going to be moving that over using Rust.
And the benefit for that part is that it would be more cross-platform, right?
Yeah. So we're currently in Swift because Matt, one of our founders, he wrote it all in Swift because that was what he was familiar with. But that really kind of hurt us in terms of like cross-platform. So there were most of our components were written things that were not very cross-platform. And now Rust, we really see as like the way forward to being able to get on like Windows and Linux as well.
Yeah, can we actually talk about, because there's quite a few like rewrites, I believe, right? And like I'm looking at what you said, like the CLI was Swift, Go, then Rust. VigTerm was C, then Rust.
Yeah.
Can we actually talk about like what was like the catalyst that said, okay, let's rewrite it in Rust, and then like how did you guys actually check it? Like that's I think it's a super compelling story.
So the first thing that we actually had was like that we moved over to Rust was VigTerm. So VigTerm was written in C, and it was, you know, like any type of system stuff that you're doing with C, you have to like do a lot of like malloc and like manual memory allocation, things that start getting kind of annoying. Like we had like way more logic than you ever want to like format strings, for example. And like it was difficult to package libraries, like all these different issues. Like we're like, we don't really like this being in C. We want to move this over to being in Rust, because like Rust is a very nice systems language that, I mean, obviously most listeners of this understand the advantages of Rust for using on systems applications. But like being able to move that to Rust has enabled us to like package libraries much easier, because the cargo really is a much easier build system to use than like all the different like make files and stuff that we had before. And as we started moving that over, we realized like, so our CLI, like I also mentioned, that was initially in Swift. It really wasn't that good. We moved it to Go because we wanted to use, there's libraries from Charm, and they make really nice libraries, but as we started moving VigTerm over as well, we realized like a lot of our stack is going to Rust. We have been eyeing Tauri to use with Rust as well. So like we realized just like if most of the rest of our stack has been going to Rust, we probably should also move the CLI as well. And that's been really like, it's been really enjoyable using using Rust for the CLI because of Clap. Like we used Cobra with Go for our CLI parsing, and going to Clap has been really enjoyable.
Yeah, Clap has been getting a lot of praise. So I mean, I haven't had a chance to play with it yet. Is it really that good? Because I do hear like the bad part about Clap is that there's quite a bit of compilation with Clap now.
Yeah, so there's two different APIs that Clap provides. There is like this builder API that is a lot more like kind of lightweight, but like is a little more like verbose because you're like calling functions to like add different sub CLI commands and stuff. And now there's their new derive, which if you ever used, I think it's like struct op. Can't remember the old crate that was like this. But basically you kind of like write out structs and enums and like different structures, and then Clap will then create the CLI for that and parse it. And that API is like really nice to work with. And actually as well, if you're using Clap, there are completions that Clap can generate for like ZSH and Bash, and as well actually with Fig. So if you write your CLI using Clap, you're able to auto-generate a completion for Fig, and we'll be able to give you an intelligent completions just because you use Clap.
Yeah, I remember that we had, I think it was Ed Page on here talking about Clap, and it sounded really, really interesting. I'd love to
Yeah, Ed's been great to work with.
I see I have a tutorial queued up over here, and I think in one of my many 20,000 tabs to actually play with Clap. So maybe I should do that today instead of a little bit more up to date. But for Tori, though, that's pretty interesting, because I did take a look at Tori before, but what I didn't like about Tori, I think I'm saying this correctly, is like it's kind of a HTML based or something. There's a lot of things you have to write in HTML, or am I wrong?
So basically Tauri exists as like a cross-platform window type library, but like not in your traditional sense. So like the idea is that you do write like your application in like a combination of Rust and HTML. So like you're able to display a window that's HTML, because like I think most like web developers these days, like there's Electron apps, like everything is kind of focused on building UIs in HTML. And then like a lot of that's like kind of interacting with the system that's not as nice to do from JavaScript. So you can interact with the system from Rust. So it really gives you that advantage of both like having like a native binary while at the same time not like bundling with Electron and then having to use like Electron's interface to the system. Really kind of gives you the best of both worlds in that sort of sense.
Yeah, I wanted to see what an actual Tori app would look like, but I'm trying to find like a picture of something, but I haven't really seen it. Like to me, like I'm just thinking about many years ago, people were making a lot of apps with, what was that? I forgot the name of that one for the mobile. It's like Ionic, right? Now you see an Ionic app, you're like, oh, I know this is Ionic. This is really not attractive compared to like native solution. So when this thing gets compiled, it's going to look native, or it's going to look more like HTML? Sorry, go ahead.
I think the real advantage of Tauri like is that you're able to build something that looks any way that you really want because you're using those web frameworks, but with the speed and everything of more like a native solution, because you're not bundling the whole Chrome runtime with it like Electron. It really is, I think, the best way to go cross-platform if you want to do kind of more like a web-based application, but also like have native interfaces to everything.
So you have to write HTML. Is there any JavaScript or something? How do you bind between the two then?
Yeah, so you can write your front end in any way that you want. You can write in React or Vue or like whatever JS framework you want. And then Tauri provides a way of calling out to Tauri using like functions that you can generate. And it kind of creates like this JS interface. And there's a lot of different ways you can figure that. And you can really kind of customize like how you want your API to work between Tauri and the JavaScript app.
What about if you use something like U, so you can really stay as much Rust as you can? That's going to be supported, right?
Yeah, that'd definitely be something you could do with Tauri if you wanted. I'm not sure that if you wanted to do a native Rust UI, though, it might be better not to use Tauri. But like if you did want to specifically use U, like that is definitely a way that you could go with Tauri.
Have you guys looked at any other GUI solutions out there? Because it seems like there's just too many, right? If you go to arewegui.rs, there's like a lot.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of GUI solutions, but like one of the things that we're really looking at is that like kind of more like there's so many web developers out there, and it's really kind of, I think there's like a kind of high barrier to like start writing a desktop application for those web developers. And it would be nice if there's some type of way to bridge the gap between those two without packaging Electron like every other app does.
Yeah, I mean, the nice part about Electron, though, I mean, there's a lot of people using Electron in quite a interesting way. Like, I think Slack does things pretty interesting where they, like, try to be able to push out, like, updates and also try to be able to, like, on the fly, download the latest version of stuff so that they can kind of be nimble and not have to, like, make you re-download the entire Slack app. So there's, like, pluses and minuses on the entire, like, Electron thing. But I think overall, the performance is the biggest issue, right? There's a trade-off for like pushing updates without actually making people download the entire app, right?
Yeah. I think Tauri should help alleviate some of those issues as well with performance, because if you do have really high performance intensive tasks, you can just push those out to Rust, and then really you can just say like application logic is mainly in Rust, and you can just do UI and stuff that you want in the actual HTML.
Okay. So what's the progress on actually using Tauri, or you guys haven't started on rewriting that app yet?
Yeah, we have both a app on like kind of, beta internally on both Linux as well as Windows. And so Linux support is we're using different systems APIs to like cursor position and stuff like that. Like these are the main things that like really are kind of prohibitive to going cross-platform, is like finding out where the cursor position on the screen is and like figuring out how to position the window and like interacting, like a lot of like weird kind of like things that are not easy to just like grab a library and then it's like, oh, then it's cross-platform. So we're working on getting both those working on Windows as well as Linux. And I think we've made pretty good progress. And like even potentially by the time that you listen to this episode, we could have some more type of a public beta out there for that.
Yeah, actually, I do want to ask. So you guys, let me go back to what you wrote down for me. You went from CLI Swift to Go to Rust, and I think you talked about the charm, right? So charm is super attractive. Like I was looking at it, I was like, wow, I wish we had something like this. But I think we actually have something similar already. Yeah,
so like charm was one of the main motivating factors for us initially to use Go, the CLI, and like we even wrote like this thing back in December when like everyone was doing like kind of wrapped up things for the year. We had Fig wrapped, where kind of like we have some local statistics on our computer and we're able to like show you like, oh, this is how many times you ran this command and stuff. And like it was really nice using it for like that type of like interactive, like fun thing in the terminal. But it wasn't like a big enough motivating factor for us to stay with Go. And instead of like, since the rest of our stack was going to Rust, it was like go to Rust. And like if we really need that type of stuff, like either we can write it or like find out there's some other library with Rust to do the similar sort of things.
Yeah, I think is it TUI or something? I forgot the name of it. It was actually
so there's TUI RS. It doesn't quite do all the same sort of things that Charm does, but yeah, in terms of like getting TUI type interface on the screen, yeah, it provides that. The real advantage of Charm was, I think, Boba T, which just kind of gives you like a model view controller sort of interface to writing TUI applications. And I'm not sure if there is as good of a solution in Rust. There are some, but just like Charm is really specialized on that specifically.
But also too, that I'm not going to forget about is that Go is already pretty cross-platform, and I think you can compile it to anything else that you want, like whenever, right? In terms of like with Rust, there's a lot more things you have to do.
Yeah, Go definitely was cross-platform. Like there was no reason that we needed to switch from the CLI from Go to Rust to go cross-platform. I think it was just the rest of our stack was going towards Rust. It seemed advantageous to move the CLI as well. And we did have some issues with Go along the way that we're like, oh man, we kind of wish that we had used Rust. Like I was constantly having like annoyances at like how Go does like error handling. I don't know. I come from a Rust background, so like using Go for me was like, I don't like this as much. So personally, like I'm like very pro. I was very pro switching the CLI to Rust.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that stick out to me. Like one is that with Rust, you can pretty much guarantee that it's usually not going to segfault. Not saying 100%, depends on what you're doing. And like when something compiles, it can usually run pretty well. But then the other thing too is every time I see stuff about Go, most of the articles are about how to tweak the GC so that way you don't get hit, which I think is the most surprising.
Yeah, so most of our stuff that we had written Go were nothing long lived. So like it was like a quick CLI command or like some sort of like callback or hook to some system integration. So there was nothing that was like really we needed like low GC like stuff for, but it is useful not having such a high overhead runtime if we don't want as well. Like if we want just like some sort of like we don't need the async runtime, we can do without it. Like it's easier. But we do use Tokyo a lot as well, and like Tokyo definitely is a very nice runtime as well. So like either way we could have gone. I think it would have been fine either way, but it's nice having the whole stack in Rust, like I said.
Are you aware of like what was the like? So when you joined the company, there was just a start to do some things in Rust. Is that right?
There was basically nothing. There was nothing in Rust when I joined the company, and I have been basically driving the whole transition to Rust. So we've been hiring more Rust engineers. We've been really focused on swifting over the whole stack over to Rust, and more of the team is writing Rust. We're really investing heavily in Rust, and this is we're really betting big on Rust.
Sorry, I just caught bits and pieces of that. So you said there was nothing written in Rust when you joined? Is that
yeah,
starting to turn? I missed that part.
We definitely had ideas of like the fig terms specifically, as well as Towery. Like these are things that we wanted to do, but like hadn't been written in Rust, and like we really saw like these are the things that we want to rewrite in Rust, and that's like really what I've been working on. Okay,
so you guys wrote a couple of things, or at least one piece in Rust, took a look at the difference, and you guys were like, okay, this is really the way to go. And
yeah,
okay, like what was like the thought process of saying, okay, this is working okay, let's start to do other things?
So the fig term, like I mentioned earlier, like it was written in C, and C is definitely not like the nicest language to work in today compared to Rust. So like when we switched that over, it like kind of made it easier to start switching other things over as well, since we have some of that like foundational, like we wrote like use a lot of protocol buffers. So, like once we started like getting libraries that worked with protocol buffers, we start like more and more of our like internal like APIs and stuff, like it became easier and easier to write other things in Rust. And like I mentioned, like Towery has been like a long term, like this is the way that we do want to go cross platform.
Sorry, I missed a good chunk of everything you said, but I think I have an idea about what you were saying. Again, sorry about this at home. For some weird reason, we're having really big connection issues today with different platforms we've been trying out. Okay, so with switching to Rust, right? If you keep switching platforms, that's like a huge cost. You guys are basically still a startup, right? Has there been like major talks about, hey, this is a little bit tricky because we just switched pieces from, like Swift to Go. Now from Go to Rust, like there's a huge like trade-off over here. Was there a lot of discussions about this, or was it just like, no, we need to replace this?
So the Swift CLI that we had, like that was never a tenable solution. Like we had to switch. That was a very hacked together solution. Most of Fig in its early days was very hacked together. And so like a lot of these rewrites have not just been like, it's been like a rewrite as well as like changing like how everything foundationally works, because it was like everything's hacked together. So now we're able to kind of like solidify and say like, these are like actually how we want to do like getting the window, and like actually how we want to do like getting what you've typed in. And like a lot of it was like kind of, you could think of the Swift app and everything kind of prior to like almost as being like a prototype of like what we want on Mac. And then we're able to then like really get that into like a really solid and like good foundation to like be able to go to other platforms once we are switching to Rust.
Okay. Now, for Fig though, right? You guys are still starting off, but you already have some type of go-to-market strategy, meaning like a way to actually start making some money, right? You're looking to have some type of team integration in order to do that. Is that right?
Yeah. So Fig is always going to be free for individual users. Like, we don't want to monetize individual users. We're really looking to sell teams the ability to synchronize things like environment variables with a dot file program, create internal like CLI, like completions, be able to onboard users more easily to your company. Like, we're really looking at like selling to enterprise customers, these like enterprise features that aren't really useful to individual users, but would definitely be useful for enterprise customers.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, sharing environment variables, I guess that could be useful. I don't know how that would actually work and be secured properly. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so I mean, like a lot of these team-based features, like we're working on getting like starting to get these working and like internally. Like, we don't have like everything set up yet. We're really working on getting our app ecosystem working. So like users are like individual users are able to say like, this is something that we actually want. We definitely need to find like what enterprise customers are looking for the most with Fig. And I think that sharing team features is the main thing that everyone these days needs to share among their team and be able to onboard new users. And these things really are, I think, what like everyone will be looking for with Fig. And different things like running tests, run books, like all these sorts of things are things that there aren't really great solutions right now for in your terminal to share across users. And Fig, we really want to bring that to customers.
Okay. Have you, like, what's been the feedback so far? Have people been pretty positive, or any kind of like things that you guys think are missing the mark on?
So I think we've have a pretty positive response overall. We've had little bits of feedback that people don't love how Fig is running in the background, like you mentioned earlier, and other feedback that like, you know, like, why do I need to sign in to use autocomplete and stuff like that? But like, we don't have like, we're not 100% sold on like, oh, Fig will always be closed source or anything like that. Like, we definitely want to start open sourcing more components. We don't want the community to hate us by any means. And we definitely like want users to be able to say like, oh, Fig is something that I use as part of my daily workflow. And we don't want them to have any questions. Like, we're not selling your data. We're not like, there's no reason that you need to have any backlash towards us.
Yeah, and you guys seem pretty responsive, right? Like, as soon as I got an email, I don't remember what time it was, and I replied, and it's pretty interesting. Yeah, here we go. This is about 9 o'clock in the morning my time, and then that must be, if you're on the West Coast, that's still in your early evening, I think. And then
we really highly prioritize getting back to users. Yeah, like all the feedback that we can get right now, and like early testing, and like getting out these new products, like we really want to be responsive to users and like see like what pain points do they have that we can help with.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot, because like, I know, at least for me, like I just complain a lot, like whenever something's not quite working right. But then as soon as I get feedback from them, no matter what it is, even if it's, oh, sorry, we don't support that. Oh, okay, at least I got confirmation and it calmed me down a bit. Like, usually it's like, no, I'm expecting this thing to work. Like when I put up Fig and I'm using Warp as my daily driver for most things nowadays, and it's not quite working, and it's like, well, we don't really support that one yet. We may look into that or something. So then actually, sometimes I pop up in iTerm and see how it works and stuff. So it's been interesting. I'm still getting into it, but I think overall it's pretty cool. If I want to install like those autocomplete scripts, I actually have to install them by hand, right? There's no way that I could just browse from within the app and just say download and like install.
So all the autocomplete specs should already be there, and like any command that you type, you'll get completions for. Our upcoming products, if you type Fig and just type Fig and enter, you'll see it comes up with like, these are like our future things that we're working on. You can see dot files there and plugins. So these will be having more public betas of these soon. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, this is pretty interesting. I think with a lot of my team right now, they're pretty new to the terminal. They're getting used to it. So this could be definitely helpful for them. I know sometimes they type wrong or I type wrong sometimes, and that's, I think, is the most difficult part.
Yeah, definitely being able to give new users to the terminal, as well as making team workflows more easy to share across users. Like if you do have some workflow and it's different from a different user, I guess it really would be useful to be able to synchronize and like say like, this is, you just type something and you can say like, oh, this is what other members of my team have been using. And like, these are definitely features that we're looking at integrating into Fig.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, very cool. I don't think I have any more questions. Is there anything that you wanted to shout out to say maybe you guys are hiring or you want people to come check out the app or anything like that?
Yeah, so we're really looking for Rust engineers right now. So if you're interested in working at Fig and working on our going cross-platform, like go to fig.io/jobs. And if you're interested in trying out autocomplete or any of our upcoming features, go join our Discord.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it. Wish our connection was a little bit better. We might have easier topic stuff. Please don't take it as offensive. Just want to let people know at home what's the problem in case we sound a little bit out of sync. So
That was great talking. Thank you.
yeah, and go to fig.io, check it out. If you guys are using iTerm or they're recently in the process of supporting JetBrains, VS Code, I believe, it's already supported, right?
Yeah.
You go to fig.io, you have a big list of all the different support. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Support for all terminals on macOS should be coming very soon.
Great. Again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And you guys came on pretty quickly, so I'm happy that it was easy for us to schedule something pretty quickly.
Thank you.